Dear students, for the paper on fertility, we will discuss now on the module titled Implications of Below Replacement Level Fertility. It is important that given the demographic transition and the changes in the fertility levels and how when a society attains below replacement level of fertility, what it implies. This is the main focus of this module. Replacement level fertility is a technical term which seems almost self-explanatory. Replacement level fertility is the level of fertility at which a population exactly replaces itself from one generation to the next. In developed countries, replacement level fertility can be taken as requiring an average of 2.1 children per woman. In countries with high infant and child mortality rates, however, the average number of births may need to be much higher. Replacement level fertility is not associated with a unique set of age-specific birth rates. When a country reaches replacement level fertility, other conditions must be met for zero population growth and also to be attained. Replacement level fertility will lead to zero population growth only if mortality rates remain constant and migration has no effect. The momentum of past and current demographic trends may also take several generations to work itself out. A change to replacement level fertility therefore leads to zero population growth only in the long run. The size of the population at which population growth levels of usually differ from the current population size. It follows that fertility level is not in itself a reliable guide to population growth, and it is instead better to examine actual or projected population growth directly, then subsequently relating such growth to fertility, mortality and migration. Sections describing measuring a population's actual fertility level, interpreting cohort measures, interpreting period level measures and projected population growth in the country like UK are also to be seen in this module. For all birth cohorts in the UK from 1950 onwards, fertility will or already has been limited to below replacement levels, although population size is projected to grow until approximately to the period of 2027. Population in that year is projected to be 4.3 million individuals, larger than UK population of mid 1992. The world's population will rise from just over 7 billion in 2012 to nearly 9.6 billion by 2050. Most of the world's regions have already achieved or close to achieving replacement level fertility. Replacement level fertility is the total fertility rate, that is the average number of children born per woman at which a population exactly replaces itself from one generation to the next without migration. This rate is roughly 2.1 children per woman for most countries, although it may modestly vary with mortality rates. Other reasons for a significant fall in the proportion of currently married women of reproductive ages and a decline in fertility among married couples as brought out by Atto 2001. The resumption of fertility decline that occurred after 1985 was impelled by underlying socio-economic changes, including the sharp rise in real income per capita, which increased almost 8-fold between 1955 and 1990. During the same period, the proportion of the urban population rose from 37 to 77% and the average lifespan increased from 50 to 76 years for males and from 54 years to 82 years for females. However, socio-economic development, including such factors as rapid urbanization, increased education levels, and economic participation of females, have facilitated the acceptance of small family norm and contributed to the sustained decline in fertility, as brought out by Cho and Lee 2000. Now, let us focus on what are the consequences of low fertility levels. As a result of low fertility, fewer children are born and progressively large numbers of adults move into the older age groups. Changes in the age structure of a population and population aging are inevitable consequences of low fertility. In the long term, population aging is not the only radical outcome of persistent low fertility. An old age structure also provides the momentum for a decline in population, just as a young population provides the momentum for accelerated population growth, as brought out by MacDonald 2000. The nature of the substantial change in population age structures as a direct outcome of the current low fertility is an important aspect that needs to be discussed. There are many significant causes involved in population change, like factors due to urbanization, migration, employment, education, and advanced health services. As United Nations stated that the change in the population in 5 countries, that is China, Japan, Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Thailand, occurred very significantly. In the period 2000 to 2050, the proportion of the population under age 15, that is young age population, will experience a continuous fall, while the proportion of the population aged 65 years and older, that is old age population, will increase. In the world as a whole, as well as specifically in the continent Asia, the young age population and the old age population will converge during the next 50 years. All the 5 countries examined in this study will have a crossover of these age groups by 2050. Its timing, however, will vary with the pace of their demographic transition. The earlier and faster the transition, the earlier the crossover. Among the 5 countries, the fertility transition occurred much earlier in Japan, which therefore has already experienced the crossover of its young age and old age populations. In 2000, Japan's old age population represented 17% of the total population, as compared with the young age population representing 15% of the total. With the dramatic increase in the next few decades, it is projected that in 2050, Japan's old age population will make up 36% of the total population, almost 3 times as high as the proportion of the young age population. As the changing proportions suggest, Japan will continue to be one of the most aged countries in the world. It is also worth noting that 3.8% of Japan's population in 2000 consisting of population aged 80 years and older, that is oldest world. This fast growing population of the oldest world is projected to constitute 10.4% of the total population in 2025 and 15.5% in 2050 as projected by United Nations 2002. As we can see from the data in the table that fertility is declining in many countries and the elderly population is increasing, but how does lower fertility impact in these countries? According to economists like Gary Becker and Richard Posner, I quote, "There is growing discussion in many low fertility countries about the negative consequences of having fewer young persons and the prospects already a reality in Germany, Japan, Russia and few other countries with low immigration levels of declining populations. In richer countries, retirement incomes and medical care of the elderly are largely financed by taxes on the younger working population. Low birth rates eventually lead to fewer men and women of working ages and hence a smaller tax base to finance social security payments unless the fewer children born have sufficiently greater amounts invested in their education and other human capital. Although potential difficulties in financing social security benefits are receiving the most attention, other negative effects of low birth rates may be of equal or even greater importance. Low fertility reduces the rate of scientific and other innovations since innovations mainly come from younger individuals. Younger individuals are also generally more adaptable, which is why new industries like high-tech startups generally attract younger workers who are not yet committed to older and declining industries. The great majority of countries have had growing populations during the past 250 years as world population grew at unprecedented rates. Yet, ever since Malthus wrote his great work on the harmful effects of population growth on incomes, group after group have opposed high fertility and growing populations as bad for the world's food supply, standard of living and environment, including local and global pollutions. However, these possible negative effects of larger populations have to be weighed against the sizable benefits from more people. These benefits include a large number of young persons who, as mentioned earlier, are more likely to innovate, such as coming up with more efficient ways to grow food and pay for the benefits to retired men and women. A bigger population also increases the demand for new drugs, software, social networking and other innovations that have increasing returns to the scale of demand, as quoted by Becker and Posner 2013. Let us discuss some of the case studies of countries. Now, at first we discuss about case of Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is the exception to this fertility trend. Its total fertility rate was 5.4 during the period 2005 to 2010, double that of any other region, and it is projected to decline only to TFR 3.2 by 2050. These expected reductions in fertility rates reflect expectations of increasing urbanization, expected declines in child mortality and increases in income among other factors. This total fertility rate trajectory will result in a population increase of 1.2 billion people in Sub-Saharan Africa, that is mainly from period 2012 to 2050. This increase will more than double the region's current population of 0.9 billion to 2.1 billion by 2050 and quadruple it to 3.9 billion by year 2100, according to the estimate made by the Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. The region's projected growth in population will account for half of the planet's population growth between 2012 and 2050. This projected increase in population poses a food security challenge for the people of Sub-Saharan Africa. The region is already the world's hungriest. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, 27% of Sub-Saharan Africa's people are undernourished, while a study by the US Department of Agriculture estimates that it is home to 44% of the world's hungry people. The region currently has the world's lowest crop yields, with the cereal yields of only 1.5 metric tons per hectare per year, roughly half the world's average. Much of the soil has lower carbon content and is depleted of nutrients. Sub-Saharan Africa could reduce the challenge of feeding its population if it were to achieve the replacement level fertility of 2.1 by 2050. Doing so would require a reduction in the region's average total fertility rate at a faster pace than currently projected. According to analysis conducted by the Oxford Institute of Population Aging, such a reduction would result in a Sub-Saharan African population of 1.76 billion by 2050, that is roughly 390 million, less than UNDAC's most recent medium level fertility scenario as projected for the year 2050. Achieving replacement level fertility in Sub-Saharan Africa by 2050 and ensuring it is achieved as projected in other regions could generate a number of benefits. It would reduce food demand by roughly 600 trillion kilocalories per year by mid-century, closing about 9% of the 6,500 trillion calories per year global gap between food available in 2006 and that needed in 2050. More dramatically, it would reduce the size of the projected gap in Sub-Saharan Africa's crop production for that period by approximately 1/4. The region already relies on imports for roughly 20% of its staple crops, so closing this food gap would significantly contribute to food security. Reducing fertility rates could also lead to economic benefits through a demographic dividend. During and after a rapid decline in fertility, a country simultaneously has fewer children to care for and a greater share of its population in the most economically productive age bracket. Researchers estimate that this demographic shift was responsible for up to 1/3 of the economic growth of the East Asian tigers between 1965 and 1990. Furthermore, achieving replacement fertility would reduce agriculture's impact on the environment. Based on the FAO projections for yield gains in the region, Sub-Saharan Africa will need to add more than 125 million hectares of crop land from 2006 levels to meet the region's projected crop needs in 2050. Achieving replacement level fertility would cut needed cropland expansion by 1/3, potentially sparing an area of forest and savanna larger than Germany from conversion. This sparing would reduce the carbon emissions that would have resulted from that conversion. A reasonable value for this reduction to the world would be $400 billion to $1 trillion based on alternative mitigation costs of $25 to $60 per ton of carbon dioxide. Fortunately, the most effective approaches to achieving replacement level fertility are non-coercive, save millions of lives, advance gender equity, give people more control over their lives and contribute to economic growth. These approaches focus on increasing educational opportunities for girls, increasing access to reproductive health services, including family planning, and reducing infant and child mortality. In most countries, national governments control, fund, and set policies for education systems and health services. Pursuing the approaches noted above for achieving replacement level fertility is therefore the responsibility of national governments. However, bilateral and multilateral development agencies also have a role to play by supporting programs that advance gender equity in education, reproductive health services, and nutrition and preventive health services for children under the age of 5. Civil society organizations can also help as well by raising awareness, generating resources, delivering services, and monitoring performance. The most recent population data find that sub-Saharan African fertility rates have not been declining as rapidly as anticipated by previous UNDESA projections. Yet, countries such as Botswana and Rwanda have demonstrated that enormous progress is possible. Achieving replacement level fertility in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere by 2050 is a multi-win solution to humanitarian, economic and environmental challenges and an important item on the menu for a sustained food future. The other case study which we will be discussing here is the case of Kerala in India. Kerala is well known globally for the unprecedented fertility transition in the Indian subcontinent towards the end of the last century. The state has already reached below replacement level fertility level in the 1990s, while the rest of India was experiencing high or mid-level fertility. With this backdrop, an attempt was made to explore here the plausible factors associated with sub-replacement fertility and consequent population momentum in the state of Kerala and to trace their socio-economic and health policy implications. The underlying factors that led to the fertility transition in the state was explored and discussed here. An enhanced level of human development achieved during the last quarter of the 20th century, mainly through developments in social and health sectors, is likely to be the main contributor. Unlike in other states of India, there were historical factors as well that functioned as a catalyst for this, such as widespread education and women's empowerment. As an inevitable demographic impact, population growth due to momentum is expected to be very strong in Kerala, with an age structural transition favoring the old. The so-called demographic dividend invoked by the increase of labor force derived from the youth bulge in the age structure is being lost in the state due to very limited capital investments and political will. Again, as a direct consequence of population growth, population density in Kerala will take a staggering level of 1,101 persons per square kilometer in the year 2026. The ill effects of environmental deterioration and consequent changes in morbidity patterns will have to be dealt with seriously. The very foundations of health policy needs revamping in the light of demographic changes associated with sub-replacement fertility. The tempo of population aging is very high in Kerala. The proportion of population aged 60 and above years is likely to be 20% in the year 2026, whereas it will be around 12% only in the country as a whole. The current level of social and health infrastructure in the state may not be sufficient to cope with the emerging demands of population aging, since the financial and morbidity burdens of the elderly are already quite high. In this regard, Kerala portrays a typical case of the vagaries of the onset of sub-replacement fertility level in the absence of reasonable structural changes in the economic and health fronts. Thus, students, in this module, we are able to focus on the factors that contributed for below replacement level and its implications on the society and also on the future demographic scenario. And in this regard, two case studies also we have focused, one by taking sub-Saharan Africa and the other Kerala in India. Overall, in this module, it is important to understand that given the demographic transition, the fertility transition is bound to occur, and in the process what it implies and what projections and precautions are required for a society are well addressed in this module.